there's going to be a lot of lean and hungry agencies that kind of grow up in this new world where, wow, tools are plentiful and AI is amazing, and we don't really need to hire 25 people and have multiple associates doing work that AI agents can do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Hey, Justin, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I have been really looking forward to this one. You have built quite the reputation in the PR world, especially with Salient PR's creative work, which helps tech startups and emerging brands tell their stories in really powerful ways. And for those of you that don't know who Justin is, he's actually and his company have both been featured in outlets like Forbes and Business Insider, and that is absolutely no small feat. So we're really excited to have you on the show, Justin. If you wouldn't mind starting off, just let us know where you're joining in from today, and let us know about how busy things are in the PR world right now.
Well, thanks for having me, Darren. Really appreciate it. I am coming in from Austin, Texas, and yeah, things are busy. Things are always busy, right? I mean, that's sort of the nature of the news cycle. It's one thing today, it's one thing tomorrow, and um, yeah, but it's definitely an exciting time. And I think we can get into all the things that are happening, but definitely the kind of the rise of AI with just standalone and also just being integrated into companies. I think every one of my clients is kind of racing towards that. It seems like it has only increased the just amount of work and opportunities. And so, yeah, it's really exciting, and I'm happy to be here and contribute to your audience in whatever way it makes sense.
Well, sounds good, Justin. I really appreciate you being on the call again. And for those of you, if it's your first time listening, just to set the tone, this is a super casual conversation. We treat it like a conversation between peers rather than a formal interview because we want this to be raw and real. And for those of you that haven't heard of the digital shift yet, this is where we're going to dive in and talk about four key areas. We're going to go into Justin's background and his company. We're going to talk about what the current state is in the industry and the trends that are occurring there. From there, we're going to look at his company and talk about the key metrics that he's focused on. And last but not least, excuse me, going into the future with AI as well as where we see things are going. So if you're ready to buckle up, this will take about 30 to 4 minutes, and I hope you guys have a great time. And one last thing, Justin, like everyone else on this show on the digital shift, is all related to innovators, C-suite, and owners of businesses. So we are interviewing the best in the industry to where we are getting to get all of their key expertise from public relations, technology, and cybersecurity all in one place. So, Justin, I hope that introduction did well for you. Let's go a little bit more into your role and your business. I'll let you take the lead on that. Where would you like to start?
Well, thank you for that. That was super kind. I guess we can start, but I'll just kind of do an overview of our agency and kind of some of the work we've done, and then you can kind of drive it with the questions you think makes the most sense. But yeah, so we're a boutique PR agency, and the focus for us is primarily B2B. I mean, you mentioned cybersecurity. We certainly have clients in that space. But in general, I think any sort of innovative company or startup, we want to speak to them. And we think by and large, PR is just great storytelling. And that is kind of what we're looking for when we look for clients, is like whether they're, a disruptor, maybe they're an incumbent, but they're doing something interesting. I think, you mentioned, a lot of things there in the intro, but I think in terms of kind of how this space is doing and what's happening with media and what things are changing, um, we've definitely seen over the last 10 years or so just a real consolidation in the media space. A lot of sort of traditional outlets are getting smaller. There's more kind of emerging channels, whether it's podcasts like this one, or influencer marketing and things like that have kind of cropped up. YouTube is huge, right? And so I think that when we're doing our work, we still have a lot of clients that are looking for kind of traditional media, but I think it's broadening. And at the end of the day, PR is storytelling, but it's also about raising awareness. And most of our clients, whether it's top of funnel, they're looking to get just sort of generate more awareness and more leads, or they're at the sort of the bottom funnel, and PR can kind of help be that credibility and validation to help close that big deal. We're trying to help clients wherever they are in that journey. And we have, worked with seed, startups, really scrappy, really lean, small teams, founders only and a few people, all the way to, 3, 4, 500 person companies that are, quote unquote, named unicorns worth $1 billion or more and are, well on their way to IPO and everything in between that as well. So, yeah, we have a lot of diverse experience in terms of just the types of companies we work with, and I've got a lot of stories and things that could be interesting. But I'll kind of turn it back to you, and you let me know where you want to sort of take things from here.
Sure, I appreciate that, Justin. So let's start with just your background. What is your
Yeah.
background and what inspired you to start your company?
Yeah. So my background is mostly, I got started in, well, early days, it was like sales, and I think I actually would have liked sales. However, my very first job, it was like working for a lead gen company, where like, yeah, it was like we were a company that was getting leads for like the most random niche businesses, and there was really not much love or passion in that place. So I didn't last very long there. But luckily, fortune would have it that I ended up working for Apple. I was there during the time where Steve Jobs was running things. That was really exciting, and was kind of in the higher education department and sort of sales and marketing. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Um, and from there, being in the Bay Area, it's so easy to just kind of fall into startups, as cliche as that is. But that is kind of where I ended up. And I was running marketing for a bunch of different startups that were, doing different things. This is around like the mobile gaming craze, and, the iPhone was sort of still kind of relatively new. And so apps were a thing. And there was just a lot of excitement. So yeah, I was, I've managed multiple startups as sort of head of marketing. And I think kind of as you are in life, you kind of you fall into something. And one of the things that marketing is so broad, I just ended up finding that the thing that I kind of, the squeaky wheel at these places always was, hey, this PR agency is not working out. And we've had them for so long, and they're over promising on everything, and they're not doing much. And so I would kind of come in, fire them, hire a new one. 6 months later, it was kind of the same thing. And I probably had managed at that point, maybe 6 or 7 agencies across multiple companies. And that was when I really it became clear that I just wasn't really finding that no matter what agency or who recommended them, it wasn't a good fit. And for whatever reason, it would always kind of just spoil at the end. And so I brought that function in house for the companies I was working for. And like, lo and behold, I really liked doing that. I liked coming up with the creative storytelling and executing on it. And I thought it was just like fun and scrappy. And so I ended up going and working for like kind of a bigger PR agency from there. And that was also interesting as well, because then you start to, if you've never worked in the agency world, you really start to kind of see how the sausage is made. You're like, wow, this is not how I would do things. There's like, I think in any agency, there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of turnover. And when you think about like what a PR agency is, or even what a web design agency or any agency, it's just basically a bunch of people assembled to do one specific thing. And if you're losing a lot of those people, you kind of like, your reputation doesn't really matter because they're all out the door. And so I think, having stepped away from all of that, having run these and churned through agencies, having worked at a big agency, I started this company about 10 years ago and really wanted to just do something that was truly different. I didn't want to just start another agency, fall into the same trap of like, let's just have the same model and let's do things exactly like they do, because of course you're going to end up that way. So really try to just like sort of reverse it. So instead of putting a bunch of junior people on accounts, I was going to really be involved in all of our client work from the day to day, like pitching and media and press releases and coming up with the story and just doing the stuff that I love really for clients. And for many years, just did that kind of like solo. But of course, as you know, like if you're a business owner, things start to scale and you have to figure out how are you going to do this differently and still keep the quality high and that model high while you also expand. And so from that point, started adding, operations folks, adding, admins, adding a bunch of freelancers, essentially to kind of supercharge my days so that I'm able to probably do the work of, 3 or 4, senior executives. And that allows me to then work across more clients, having support, having kind of a different model where I know that everything that goes out for our clients is extremely good and at the level that I would be happy with, as opposed to just trusting someone really junior and they make a bunch of mistakes and then you're apologizing for it or downplaying it. I just didn't want to get into that. So that model has worked really well for us. We've basically found and carved out a really different niche. I think a lot of folks who end up ultimately signing and becoming our clients, they've had this similar situation where they had a bad experience at a PR agency and then they ultimately ended up finding us. And then it goes pretty well because they've had it. It's sort of a night and day when we get started. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, so what have you seen as that defining moment where you realized that traditional PR and its model needed to evolve?
I think that probably when I was actually at a PR agency and got to see how it works, because there's some of it which is when you're on the client side, or if you've hired a PR agency, you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. You just see the work output or the lack thereof, and you think, I don't know, maybe it's just this agency. But I think actually going to work at sort of a traditional agency, um, it's sort of an accumulation of many things, right? Like you have a lot of really junior people who are really stressed out. Like agencies really stretch people to their absolute breaking point. They hire young people who are, comms majors, and they come out of school and they're really excited and they want to get a job and work in the industry. And, they put them on 10 accounts or something crazy like that. So that's their day. They wake up and they're just overloaded, and then they go home and they're expected to work and they're working on the weekends. And, you can get people to do that for you for some time, and then some people will drop out, and then mostly a lot of them ultimately end up dropping out. Some will move up and get promoted. But I think that culture though is really stressful. So when I was in this agency, I was managing teams and teams of people, and so I got to see this firsthand. So having your team stressed out, having to manage teams that are stressed and stretched too thin, the problem then becomes, like, to do great PR and to do great comms, you really have to be consistent with it. It's like if you have a story that you're trying to tell, you might have to try 3 or 4 different people at a single publication before maybe moving on to the next publication, and then 2 or 3 there before moving on to the next one, and so on and so forth. And so you have to be consistent. You have to follow up. You have to be, not letting things stall out, because most of the time there is some sort of hard deadline. Your product is getting announced on October 17th and you're racing to do that. But in sort of a traditional agency, when everyone's stretched thin, they send that email and then they say, okay, I'm done and I've got to go to my next client, and they don't really come back to follow up or go to the next one. So just the sheer nature of like the economics of time, like it just doesn't allow people to do really, really good work. And then of course there are smart people at sort of traditional agencies that are sort of in senior positions, but those folks are often trying to then win the new business so that they can go and get their bonus and things like that. So they're not really sitting there thinking about, how do I come up with the creative stuff? They've delegated that out to the team that it just doesn't have time to do it. So yeah, I think that actually being there and just seeing it, and seeing how many people kind of just drop out and how the whole process was made. There's a lot of templates that are used. It's like, oh, we use something over here for some template for some person. Why don't we just use it again over here? And it's like, it's not really quite appropriate for that. It's not like it doesn't, like, this client was in a different industry. It doesn't really translate, but you're just going to copy and paste it and swap out some stuff. Like, that's kind of lazy and sloppy. But again, I don't fault people for doing this, because it really is, it's a time thing. Like if you have to get to so much stuff in a day, you really have to be taking shortcuts. So yeah, it's a tough business for sure. And so I think that, yeah, like actually after I was there for about a year, and I was just like, yeah, this is not really what I want to be doing in life. And I think, of course, the goal for a lot of folks is just to kind of make it to like a partner or something level position. And that at that point, it's, really nice compensation and not that much stress. But boy, you have to really go through the fire for maybe a decade before you might get there. And so for me, it was just like, no, I would much rather just sort of step out, be an entrepreneur, and try to fill the market with something that is, I think, a need at the time and still today, largely, with just kind of a different model of doing things. And that actually worked really well because those agencies really can't compete with us in terms of our work output. It's better. And we don't have the same overhead. So we don't have to charge outrageous retainers. Um, so yeah, I think that was probably the moment. I don't think there was a single moment where I was like, oh, this is broken. It was probably like you spend time there long enough and you kind of figure it out kind of thing.
Gotcha. So when you talk about the industry experience, you mentioned you work with a whole bunch of different types of focuses. So what major shifts are you seeing in the PR industry? And taking it from a generalization, what does that look like specific to cybersecurity companies and their PR?
I would say like in general, there is definitely more of a focus now for PR agencies to be expected to be more proficient in more types of things. So I think for sure, like if you went back 10 years ago, you could just have an agency that was good at kind of media relations and, getting your announcements out the door. But that has definitely evolved. And there is more of an expectation when clients come in for needing help in many different areas that maybe traditionally that wasn't always the case. For example, could be around content marketing, could be around SEO. And certainly in the writing space, things have changed fundamentally. I mean, I think this is like huge, but I mean, we'll get to AI, but like just in terms of one of the main things, there are dedicated folks who are, quote unquote writers that are sitting over at, most traditional agencies that I think have just been out automated out of a job. There's no real reason those people should exist anymore. And like in that specific role, like, of course they have a job, they can do something else. But by and large, AI is so good at writing these days where if you can, take an interview, take something like this, spin up a transcript, hand it over to them and say, yeah, give me like 3 different op-eds off of this. And you get something that is 85 to 90% there and it just needs some final tweaking. It's really phenomenal. And that I think is a huge shift for the PR world because content like writing op-eds and thought leadership has always been a big thing for clients. And I think if you were maybe a smaller agency or even a bigger agency, like the way that you think about that now is totally different. You don't need to have writers on staff. And while we do sort of work with freelance writers, because every now and then, like AI can't do everything, it's not going to get you into Rolling Stone or Wired or the Wall Street Journal with some generic op-ed. So there are times where we'll work with really experienced former reporters who are experts at, getting content into those places. But by and large, if it's not that, AI is amazing for a lot of other things. And then in terms of like how it sort of applies to cybersecurity, I think, given that it is such a niche area where, you don't really have a huge number of mainstream media that are covering that space. Like there are a lot of cybersecurity publications and influencers and, avenues for channels to talk about those things and those topics. But it's not like you go to, uh, like Mashable or some sort of like general consumer oriented business publication and cybersecurity stuff. You might see it if there's like some big hack or something's happened. Of course, you'll see in the news, but by and large, like they're not covering, oh, there's been some sort of product upgrade and, it's this much more efficient or better at finding threats and 0-day exploits and things like that. So by and large, you sort of have um, you have your sort of core trade media, which I call them. Every single client of ours, like, because we have so many different industries we represent, from agriculture to Internet of Things, DevOps, crypto, you name it. And then of course, cybersecurity, right? Every one of those has like their 5 or 10 publications that are truly dedicated to like covering the ins and outs of that. And I think, well, while those publications, it's funny because those publications have always been small and scrappy. Like most of the time at like a cybersecurity publication, there might be like max 5 people working there or something, right? Like an editor, maybe a reporter, what a producer, maybe something like that. And sometimes it's just 1 or 2 people. And, you would have thought in the age where like media was consolidating and laying off people and sort of really struggling, you would have thought, okay, well, those sort of trade pubs in the cybersecurity space are going to just evaporate, because how could they possibly last if like TechCrunch can't last? But funny enough, they do just completely fine. And actually, by being so specific, they, I think, have thrived in this sort of media world where the larger publications like, Forbes and TechCrunch and Fortune and all these ones that people think of where they're like, yeah, I want to be in these big publications. Those are the ones that have actually shed tons and tons and tons of jobs and have fewer and fewer reporters working there. Whereas if you go and turn to maybe your industry's trade publications, they're pretty much the same they are today as they were 5 or 10 years ago. Now, they may not be growing massively, but they're also not laying people off. And they seem to have their core audience figured out in terms of what they care about. So when it comes to PR, you need to be developing relationships with them, especially in the cybersecurity space. Like whether you are, engaging and doing shows where they're covering topics about cybersecurity, whether you're trying to have, fast commentary where there's a breaking story and you're chasing after it. There's platforms and tools that you can use, your agency can use to help you find those things. Quoted, featured, HERA, which stands for Help a Reporter Out. These are all kind of ways, and you can filter it by cybersecurity. But I would say, yeah, like the space just continues to evolve, and you need a partner who's always really understanding like what is the landscape going to look like tomorrow, next year, because operating in that sort of 5 years ago, this is how we did things, and we would just, we're just going to pitch our story to the big publications, and that's going to be it. It just doesn't cut it anymore. So yeah, I think that's like largely how things have kind of morphed over the last few years, especially related to cybersecurity.
So there's obviously a lot there. And when you talk about a company's core value, what would you say most companies struggles with when it comes to defining their true ICP that allows them to be successful?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, certainly some of that has to do with like how good their product marketing function is within the company, where a lot of that stuff does ultimately get defined. But when I think it comes to external comms, um, there is definitely, I think most companies lack the ability to kind of zoom out sometimes. Like what have we all been there? We've all worked at companies where you're everyone's like hands down focused on like the launch of product X. And so it's like everything is you're so close to it. You're in the weeds. You are learning about every single feature and product bug and everything else, that when you are ready to announce the thing, all you can sort of see is what you've been working on for the last 6 months, and you think the messaging is really just this through this one prism of how it should be talked about or thought about, when oftentimes it's like, sure, okay, like maybe for your specific trade that's the message, but oftentimes I try to help and encourage our clients to like kind of zoom out to help broaden that message for more people. So if you're talking in the lens of like through cybersecurity, it's like, okay, how could potentially this affect hundreds of millions of people? And what is the market size of this that we're talking about? And what have the founders been doing that is sort of unique and interesting and noteworthy, and try to help pull on these different threads so that it's like, okay, great, you've got your product X launch, but it really needs to be more about that greater story that you're trying to tell to millions of people. And that's how you will sort of like elevate it and then get it into like the tier one publications and all the places that people kind of salivate over and go, oh, it would be so amazing if we were in this or we were in that place. That is sort of how you do it, is to be able to zoom out. And I think most companies do struggle with when they feel like they've got their message. They're just speaking through one very singular prism lens of like to that specific person, because they know their personas really well, but the persona of your buyer is not necessarily the persona for media. And so there's a real kind of adaptation that has to happen, and sort of helping folks figure that out, I think is it's fun. I mean, it's just, this is why having a partner helps too, because sometimes it's like you might think, a client might think that this is the biggest thing in the world, and sure, to your company it kind of is, but having another party kind of really give you the clear-eyed view of like, it may not be as big of a deal as you think it is. And in order to kind of get that coverage or that sort of story told in the way you want, we're going to need the real like before and after use cases. We're going to need to put some data to this. We're going to probably need some partners who are willing to kind of go on the record, maybe speak to the media on your behalf. And then when it's like, oh, okay, we need all those things. Yeah, you need all those things. And so, yeah, part of it, I think, is just being able to assemble a wonderful story. You need a lot of different assets sometimes, because just having, a product launch is not enough. Great ideas fail all the time, and the best products don't always win out. So I just try to remind folks of that all the time, is that, yeah, it really, I can't say this enough, having the before and after is just so important. And this often gets left behind when companies are thinking about PR. They do the thing, and then they're 2 weeks away from their announcement. They're like, we need to do PR. And it's like, okay, but do you have like a great case study that talks about what life was like before this product? Oh yeah, we can't really talk about that because all of our clients are on NDAs, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know what, like, you know what I mean? Like, what's the story then? So, um, yeah, helping folks find that is probably one of the main things we do, and not easy all the time as well.
So when you look at your own company with Salient PR, what would you say is working really well for you right now?
Um, we have great clients, and we have a great team. I would think this has just been an incredible year where, when there's always up years and down years, but sometimes when you feel like you've got the right people in the right positions doing the right things, God, you feel like you could tackle the world. I feel like that is kind of how it feels right now. So, um, and that's also when you kind of then double down and invest, more in the business to, scale further, right? Hire more people, redo your website, or whatever the thing is that you need to do that you've been putting off for a while. So, um, what has been working? I mean, we have great clients. We're executing on wins and projects. When folks come in and they need something, we're getting it done. We have all year long. We've not had a single blunder or anything where we've missed client expectations, which is, I mean, what are we at in October? I don't want to say we're going to get through the whole year without doing something wrong, but that's pretty phenomenal. Especially when everybody has different expectations, and most of the time it's pretty high. So I think, yeah, right now execution is just amazing right now.
Were there any specific metrics that you were monitoring and saw like I need to improve this in order to get to the state that your company is in right now?
I think time is actually the number one thing that we look at, right? Because when you're running an agency, it really just comes down to time, right? Everything is some subset of billable hours, and then you're figuring out, okay, well, I could stretch myself further. I could work nights, I could work weekends, but ultimately, you don't necessarily want to put yourself into a long-term position of doing things like that. So I look at yeah, basically just when things start to feel extremely stretched, and then we bring on another person and we hire somebody else to take off of the things that are time consuming and grueling. And that I think is probably the a big thing. We check in constantly with our team every single week. It's like, what are the blockers? What are the things that are taking up a ton of time? Walk me through how long this thing takes. And that's what I think a great leader has to do. You cannot just assume that your team is figuring it out with the same gusto that you personally would. You have to kind of really sometimes get in there and, okay, like really ask the hard questions. Like, okay, so walk me through the week, walk me through these particular projects. What was taking so long? And then, they surface up something which is like, okay, this is a no-brainer. We should just have this other person do that. Or we should just not do this entirely, just skip this because it's not adding value and we can cut it out and save you time. Right. But sometimes, if your team is, maybe just doesn't know or is figuring it out, they're not going to necessarily see that. So I think just, yeah, sort of like, I know there's big debate around like founder mode versus manager mode. I'm definitely in the founder mode camp of like being involved and frequently checking with your teams. I mean, that obviously makes sense based on our whole entire agency model is like really built around expertise and experience. But I think regardless of what your model is in business, you need to really be checking in with your team to find those blockers and unblock them for your people so that they can free up, and then you can also scale faster and easier as well.
So current state is going really well. When you look into the future, the next 6 to 12 months, what is Salient PR striving for?
I'd say like I'd love to double our revenue. Again, we doubled this year. I'd love to double it again next year. Um, that's going to obviously be like it's a big goal, but you have to set big goals for yourself. I think in life, whether it's personally, fitness, health, or in business, setting big aspirational goals and really aggressively working towards them. Um, and so, yeah, what does that look like? That means we are going to relaunch our website. We were currently with a web design agency that's phenomenal, that's, kicked off, and that'll probably launch at the start of the year, which will increase conversions, continue to drive more traffic, all the benefits of that. But also it's continuing to scale and find the right people, which is not easy by any means. Our team is fully remote. And so I think, when you have people who are fully remote, I've had so many different experiences. Like, I don't know what the survey is. Like, there's some stat I saw that was like, most people actually can't really work remote. Um, like they don't do the job that well. Now, like, that's not everybody. I mean, we all love to work remote, right? But there's a large percentage of people who they kind of just like check out, fall down, and and do the bare minimum or whatever it is to get by. And I mean, I've had so many experiences of, people will tell you whatever you want to hear in the interview until you actually start to get to work with them. And then you realize like they're not available, the work output is terrible, or they're inflating their hours in order to make more. So, like, I think finding people is truly one of the most important things you can do for your business. And for us, if we're going to do that again, even if we go 50% or whatever, above whatever the revenue was this year, like, I think having the right people, that's the only way that's going to actually unlock for us. And so, yeah, part of it, especially in an agency thing, is like it's a chicken and egg problem, right? You never want to necessarily hire people unnecessarily when there isn't the client work for it. But at the same time, if you sign a bunch of clients and you don't have the people for it, everybody's stressed out and burned out. So there's this balance, right? But I think, again, going back to AI, just harping on this, it has allowed you and allows us to basically smooth out a lot of these processes using automations and just allowing folks to do more with a smaller and leaner team, which then allows you to then scale easier because you can stretch a little bit further and then get that do the hiring process, find the next person, and then bring them and fold them in without having to just say, well, work more hours. You can just say, well, work smarter and, use this tool or use this tool, and you can kind of get it done faster. So yeah, I would say that's the goal, right? Just continue to grow and have great people surrounded by great people so that we can continue to execute for our clients.
And that kind of dovetails into the follow-up question I had. But when it comes to hitting that goal, so if you're trying to double your revenue, what is the bottleneck that you think you would most likely encounter that would hold you back from hitting that goal? Like, what's the big one? There's obviously going to be multiple factors, but is there one key one that you can see that you might be running into?
I mean, honestly, I could probably say it would be two things if I were to cheat. If I were to say one thing, I'd probably say it'd have to probably be um, just having enough people to deal with the amount of new business that comes in. So, blessed, lucky, whatever you want to call it, we have plenty of leads and folks who want to work with us. So we can be pretty particular about finding the right clients for us. So we're not really in a position where we don't have the opportunity to close the business. It's more just that we don't ever want to take on new business unless we know that we can execute at the level that I talked about earlier. And so in order to do that, you need to have the right team members, the right processes, they're trained up and everything. And that really does take a good amount of time to find those people to train them up and to basically integrate them into the team. So I think if I were to say one bottleneck, I would say that is one bottleneck. And then the second piece of that was probably just like, I go back to, you know, I think that really processes around closing businesses is so important, and that can be improved even further. So for example, like it's really all over the place in terms of when someone comes in the door and they're like, oh yeah, I want to hire a PR agency. It's like generally we start with a conversation, we kind of figure out what you need, and if it's a good fit, we'll put together a proposal. But there's often just there's so many ways to do that, right? Is it a 20-page document in Google Docs? Is it a one pager? Is it a 25 slide presentation? And then you also have the folks who come in and they just drop an RFP in your lap and they're like, yeah, here's like a 15-page single-spaced RFP, and we want you to answer every one of these questions. And then, of course, they're sending that off to like 50 companies or agencies, right? So, like, I think trying to sometimes we like basically saying no to things that just don't make sense, to not waste time on chasing after RFPs that you have like an almost zero chance of ever winning. And then when you do get the ideal clients, like I think I want to do a better job in the next 6 to 12 months in terms of when that final deliverable comes across their desk for the proposal that they've been asking for, that it is just perfect. Because I don't know that I've really necessarily nailed that. I go back and forth on whether or not it should be a deck, whether it should be a doc. I don't know how much people read, if they want something to skim, how much detail there should be in. And so there's a lot of ways to kind of, when you're at that finish line, to deliver the final piece. And I still think we need to improve it. So that's like the honest answer for you on kind of like maybe the two things that we'd be needing to fix or improve.
I think that was a greatly detailed response, Justin. So good job on that. The one thing we still haven't spoken about while we're looking into the future is artificial intelligence. You hinted at it at the beginning of this episode, but what do you see the trends in how AI is going to affect everything in the next 12 months?
I mean, man, it's just, uh, I mean, it is absolutely wild. I don't think, I definitely say that the hype is warranted. I've been in tech for a really long time. I don't know if it's been 20 years or something. I don't know. It makes me think how old I am, so I don't want to think about that. But I would say it's been a really long time, and I've seen a lot of things come and go as they always do. But I even think back to like when I was a teenager and we were getting the internet for the first time. I think this is even faster and more disruptive than that. I mean, if you think about the internet back in our days, it was like, it was so slow, right? Remember AOL? And like, it was like you'd sit there just waiting for an image to load, right? Across the screen. It was just so painful. And I think ultimately the internet unlocked so much, and then it became mobile, unlocking all these apps. But it took years and years. And what I'm seeing though today is the pace of acceleration in AI into just absolutely everything. I'm not even just talking about like, ChatGPT or like Gemini or any of the chatbots that we all use for day to day. You've got like hundreds, thousands of different custom bespoke AI tools for whatever specific industry or use case. But what's amazing to me is that every single one of our clients, every single one of them has all racing to integrate AI into their product in like a real genuine way, not just like a bolt on, like, oh, we've like got AI, but like they've all moved aggressively towards that. So you really can see this sort of agentic AI world where agents are going out and doing work on behalf of some worker or tasker. You've now got it so good that coders basically are graduating and really having a hard time finding a job today. I think when it comes to the PR world, it is also similarly just as disruptive. I mean, I mentioned the whole thing about writers, like, having a dedicated writer on staff at a PR agency seems completely crazy to me today. But I think it goes like far and above in a way. You don't need to have big bloated PR agencies. I actually think the fact that we've been so lean all of these years that's actually probably going to be where PR agencies ultimately end up going. Like, you've heard like there's going to be somebody who creates the first like billion-dollar company, and it's going to be like a one-person company using AI or something, right? I think it's a similar thing when it comes to agencies, where it's like not going to be one person, obviously, but I mean, maybe it could, right? But I think in terms of um, having lean teams where you have individuals responsible for the same sorts of things that they're doing today, probably even more given the expectations for what agencies are being asked to do are increasing, but that you have singular individuals doing the jobs of like 5 people because they're all operating many different AI agents to go out and accomplish X, Y, and Z for a few hours, while they then go in turn to go ask it something else to go do for a task for another 5 hours, and then go do another thing for 5 hours for another client. And essentially uh, you're now able to take on more clients, do an incredible work output, probably better than most junior associates are doing today. And you can do all that with what, a fraction, 20% of the workforce that like a big, massive agency is going to require. And I think that you sort of have this real disruptive place where PR agencies, you've got you think of like big names like Edelman and stuff like that. And it's like, these are monolithic behemoth dinosaurs. I don't know how, like, they'd have to just slash their staff by 80% and invent an entirely new business. It's just not happening. They're always going to be what they're going to be. But I think that there's going to be a lot of lean and hungry agencies that kind of grow up in this new world where, wow, tools are plentiful and AI is amazing, and we don't really need to hire 25 people and have multiple associates doing work that AI agents can do. So it's transformative. It's absolutely worth the hype. And I've never seen anything like this. I mean, obviously we use it in our processes. Obviously we use it for clients. Our clients use it. Our clients are integrating it. It's just like, and the pace at how fast that things continue to improve is absolutely wild. Like, I also think about, we're so, we really just run towards any sort of like latest and greatest model. Like, we don't care. We're very agnostic. It's like, okay, we will have Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT and whatever, DeepSeek. It doesn't matter. We will whatever the latest thing is, we will be using that thing for our clients and our work, because it is it's just that they keep getting that much better each iteration, and it's just phenomenal. And so I think, again, back to, if you're just like an agency that is just dabbling with this, or you are like, yeah, we're just going to use like ChatGPT and we're not going to pay for it, or we'll just use like an older model and it'll be fine, you're going to get crushed. You are going to get crushed, because these other models, the stuff that I struggled with, okay, we need to put together an award application, or we're putting together a speaker application for someone, things that it would, struggle with 6 months ago. Now it's just absolutely crushing. And I can't even imagine 6 months from now what it's going to do. So it's really phenomenal. I think, you can, I don't know, like AI 2027 is another thing that comes to mind as well, that like, it's pretty dystopian in terms of like, we're all going to basically be out of jobs someday, somewhat soon, as in the name implies. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that timeline or how fast things will move, but the fact remains that I think a lot of people are going to be out innovated and disrupted by AI, and the ones who are embracing it are going to and find a way to just wield it for their own businesses and purposes, are going to be the ones that actually end up on top and thrive. So we're actively doing that, and we encourage, folks to do that for themselves as well, because it's truly amazing what it's able to do today.
I love that, and I agree. I do think that, I mean, jobs are already being replaced today, and then obviously, like Nano Banana just came out, right? And that's another one that everybody's now flocking to. So I also describe it as shiny object syndrome. Like everybody knows what that is, but AI is like the epitome of that, because within a week, sometimes even a day, it's already out of date, and there's something better. There's a new version, and they're just all competing with each other. So I'm sure that, resonates with a lot of our listeners as well. So before we sign off, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our audience with when it comes to being able to grow their business and have a successful PR brand for their businesses?
Well, I think for PR, not everybody needs PR. I'll say that, that's the truth. Not everybody needs to go out and hire a PR agency. I just had a really good friend come to me just last week, and she was like, "Oh, can you please help with some articles? We need to get more awareness for this education app that we have for kids that we're launching." And I just had a much better idea for her, which is, you really should be spending time on content marketing. You really should be focusing on increasing the domain authority of your site, generating multiple blog posts every week, capturing long tail traffic keywords, and driving people from those articles through calls to actions to your homepage to then sign up for a free trial or whatever it is. And that is like, because there's no marketing that's happening at all right now in that company. So that was like, I think sometimes people just think like, I'm struggling with awareness. And it's like, well, PR might be really good for you, but it might also not really. And you can totally waste a ton of money hiring agencies that will promise you, we're going to solve your problem, but that actually isn't the thing you need. And so I would encourage people to really think before they go and sign up for an agency and commit to doing long retainers with lots of money, if they're really ready for it. And to also find a partner that is willing to tell you like it is. If like you don't have the news, then maybe you should come back to them in 6 months when you do, and then you'd be ready to kick off with them. So yeah, take a hard look at it before you get ready for it. But then when you are ready for it, don't wait until the last minute as well. I mean, when you finally, let's say you really do have something that is truly innovative, or you've got this new funding round that you've just closed and you're really excited and you're like, you ready to go. Too many people will, I've seen mistakes where people will say, we're just going to put that out on the blog. And then they come to me 6 months later and they're like, yeah, nobody covered it. And like, now that was like our big moment. And we just like we don't know what to do. And I'm like, I don't know what to do either. I think you kind of blown it. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you can't necessarily take it back. So when you have your big moment, it's actually important to engage the right partner, like a good agency, or to do the comms yourself. If you feel like you have the bandwidth and the time that you want to learn it and do it, you can totally do it yourself. I think then this, but when you are ready to get engaged, probably start working with an agency about 2 months before you're really ready to do the PR for your brand or for your product, whatever it is, because there's a lot of initial ramp, whether it's creating media lists and pitches and press releases, and you need to get the visual assets and the video demos, and then you've got to spend a solid 2 weeks pitching and stuff like that, and trying to get interest. That you don't want to rush it. So too many people come in and they're like, yeah, we're trying to go this month. And it's like, what do you mean the month's over? Like in like 5 days, you know? Um, so I think timing really matters as well when you are ready to go. So yeah, that would be my advice for anyone who's considering it, whether it's right for you. And then if it is right for you, to just sort of think about those other timing components as well.
Justin, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate those types of insights. It's really been refreshing to me to hear someone who's not just following like basic PR templates and just another run of the mill, but you're actually actively shaping them based on what you're seeing. So, to everyone listening, if you want to see how smart modern PR is actually done to help elevate your brand, definitely check them out at Salient PR, and that is salientpr.com. We'll have a link in the description for you so you can go check out Justin and his company as well. Justin, thank you again for joining me on The Digital Shift. It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Darren. I really, really enjoyed being here, and it was great. Thank you so much.
Hey there, it's Darren from The Digital Shift. I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the links in the description to learn even more information of everything we went over today. But if you enjoyed this podcast, then you are absolutely going to love this one. And if you're looking to look deeper into the technology that we go over in these videos, then go ahead and check out this one here. Regardless of which one you pick, you're going to walk away with something new. As always, I'll talk to you in the next one, and keep being awesome.